Two of the things I wanted to talk about tonight were South by Southwest, which everyone here is probably well aware of, in Austin, Texas, and another festival which is, I think, in some ways superior and really cool, called Resonate in Serbia, that a lot of people don't know about. Definitely worth keeping an eye on this one. It's grown, it's about 220% growth per year, for a bit of quantification for you, and really has the cutting edge of how art and technology are colliding way before it gets as commercial in its application as South by. So I'm going to throw in some just interesting stuff that I thought from both these festivals. I won't talk about all the stuff that you've read about in blogs, so Google Glass and all the apps and Elon Musk, because you can just read TechCrunch for that. I thought I'd pick out of the 500 plus panels and speeches and things at South by, some of the things that maybe weren't given as much acknowledgement and might be of interest to the kind of QS enthusiasts amongst us. First session that I attended was by a guy called Todd Humphreys, who's actually based in Austin at the University of Texas. He is the guy in the US for cutting edge GPS stuff. He's the GPS guru in the US. All these things down the bottom, I'll put this talk out as a PDF on the QS Facebook group. They're the kind of things, if you're interested, that you should Google, because you can get to the things rather than putting annoying URLs up there. Todd Humphreys gave a great talk, which is really based on an extension of his TED video called How to Fool a GPS. He's talking about how only I think in the year 2000 or 99 was GPS, the global positioning kind of network, made public. Like, it's open, it's non-encrypted, and we're now essentially addicted to it. Everyone uses GPS in multiple ways that they know about every day. For the quantified self aspect, you use it, or you can use it to track how you move, where you are, in reference to other things. It's gone from, a chip's gone from the size of being like a wallet down to the size of a keyring. And now this is a cool new release by a pretty groovy little tech company in GPS called Nublox. That's the size of the point of a key. So the chips now are small enough, that's just Moore's law at work, small enough and getting cheap enough that soon enough, Todd Humphreys said that there will be millimeter-sized dots that will be solar-powered, that will work with the GPS network, and that you can just put on anything. Your keys, your pants, your pets, your kids, your girlfriend, and you'll be able to track those things. Now, the problem as the tech gets smaller, it gets heaps more convenient, and it gets cheaper. But the flip side of that, the kind of dark side of that, is it's going to be a lot easier to track people without them knowing, by placing very small self-powered GPS sensors on cars. And he demoed some of the kind of use cases of this, some of the scare stories. So he mentioned an interesting art project from an MIT student who now runs a really big electronics store, Limor Fried. She runs Adafruit, which is just where you buy open source electronics now. For one of her thesis projects, she generated a wave bubble jammer. This is an RF jammer that works across the dual band for cell phones, but also for GPSs. So this is kind of a statement project for electronics that allows you to jam within a 2 to 20 meter radius, which is a very different kind of thing. 2 meters is a personal bubble, great. I'm not allowing anything on my person to be tracked. My phone's not going to work, but I can't be tracked. To 20 meters, which is no one's phone or, you know, in the future, QS-enabled gadget in this entire room will work, to running it on a plane, which is the plane doesn't know where we're going. So very dangerous, highly illegal. But you can buy the schematics and actually buy all these parts from Adafruit or SparkFun or whatever and create this. So I thought it was interesting to note that whilst there's a quantified self movement of tracking and measuring data, including GPS data, there's already a response to that before it even happens in the case of Limor Fried, to kind of push back against pervasive tracking. Todd Humphreys also then spoke about the concept of GPS spoofing, which says that the way GPS, I won't get into it because I didn't quite understand it, but the way that GPS works is with radio frequencies and that shoot up to satellite, and they measure how long it takes to get back, and that's how it knows where you are. Right now, if you, using a similar gadget to what that jammer does, if you fire out frequencies of a similar nature, because you know where you are, you have a 50% chance of fooling a phone or a car GPS or a taxi GPS or an unmanned armed drone into choosing your signal. If you use 10 signals, you have essentially a 90% chance of fooling them. And what that means is if you hack the response coming back, you can tell that GPS that it is somewhere else. You can tell that it is a block down the street, and it might adjust how it's flying. So he gave a video of how this is in the Austin, Texas Longhorns football stadium. That helicopter is running the same software that US unarmed drones run, and he was able to basically, they were piloting it, he was able to just commandeer it off and fly it off into the distance, which is a really terrifying concept, that the same software that runs drones, that they say it's just the unarmed drones, and that the armed drones run on a different frequency. But he also mentioned that in Iran, I think last year, an unarmed surveillance drone, but owned by the military, was brought down using similar technology. So I thought that was kind of cool, that GPS, because it's really open and friendly and citizen-focused, is not encrypted enough that it's safe. I thought that might kind of raises all kinds of interesting implications for how we view tracking in space. Another thing you mentioned that I thought was probably highly relevant to people that like to track where they move, but are frustrated by the fact that a GPS can be wildly inaccurate, down to 10, 20 meters, which is great if you're driving on the street, and 10 meters doesn't really mean life or death. But if you really want to know, or use a GPS rather than a step counter about how you move, there is a solution for that. It's called carrier phase ranging. So Google this guy, he gives a really nerdy talk on it on YouTube. This is a carrier phase ranging GPS unit. It's about the size of a USB stick. So again, Moore's law, 2 years, that will be in our phone, and it's down to the centimeter. It's just the way in which GPS works. It's a more robust chip, but I thought that was kind of cool. So all the failings of GPS now, what Todd Humphreys said in his talk was in 2 years, it will be down to the centimeter. So we'll have just hyper-localized tracking. And I'm pretty interested to get my hands on some of these ones and see how they work. So I'll put up on the Facebook group as soon as I figure out how to get carrier phase tracking to work. The unofficial champions of quantified self and body measurement and health tracking at South by was this group that I'd actually never heard of. Apologies if everyone's aware of these guys and this is old news, but rockhealth.org, they're an incubator and I guess a knowledge provider for technology and health solutions. Anywhere from like QS Gadgets, they've backed with venture capital, all these companies here, and the list like literally goes on. I was like astounded about all of the people that they've been, some of them you recognize, a lot of them are a little bit geeky in terms of like it's right down into continuity of care management for people that don't speak English. So really hyper-targeted niche startups, but they were behind, I think, some of the more interesting QS-aligned talks at South by. So definitely check out their site. They've got a lot of thought leadership pieces, white papers and presentations on that site. Their SlideShare is great. Like, you know, they feed information about this kind of stuff into the McKinseys and the PricewaterhouseCooperses of the world. I spoke to some of the guys from there and I was like, wow, you guys are owning this space. One of their now ex-creative director, but you know, someone that was attached to Rock Health, a woman named Leslie Ziegler, gave a really interesting talk. It was really weird taking photos of slides, so I don't have the whole slide deck, and I can't find it. I was hoping to give you the URL. I'll reach out and email and try and get her slide deck because it was really interesting. Leslie's story though, so watch this space. She's the creative director of Rock Health, so obviously technology and health focused. She was diagnosed with this thing called ulcerative colitis, which is like a bowel disease. It has no known cause and no known cure. Really bad, like basically kind of weight fluctuations, intense discomfort through to needing operation and having your like bowels removed. So it can get really bad. She undertook a 365-day intense self-tracking quantification regime to try and figure out, look, what data can I get and how might I use that? So she ran through in her talk for 365 days, obviously getting access to the cutting edge of quantified self technology and devices being where she worked. But it was really interesting to hear her speak through, from blood work done every week through to every clip-on device that measured motion and blood sugar level and mood and heart rate and things like that, through to full genetic sequencing via 23andMe and things like that. Basically understanding the wealth of data in her genes and how she worked, and then every day logging everything she did, everything she ate, mood, stress, meetings. And after about 2 years, so after this year and the year after, she kind of gave this really nice diagram. Again, I couldn't find the slide, which is around, you got measurement, and this is, I think, interesting to this kind of movement, measurement, mindfulness, and management. So first you got to measure stuff, and then you have to be mindful of how what you're measuring is impacting your life and your health. So particularly stress and what she ate made her illness worse. And then management is correcting that. So she actually said when she looked back at the data, even when she was only mindful but not actively managing, like she wasn't responding to the data, she was just looking at like what she ate, that her symptoms, which obviously she was also tracking, like leveled off by about 50%. So even just having something goes on in your body that if you have a little bit more knowledge about an illness and you're really tracking it, that maybe there are, she said, I wasn't managing it. Probably she was doing things inadvertently that the data was telling her. Active management for her was like not eating decent like food that she liked, and not traveling, not sitting down on a plane for 12 hours. So stuff that's pretty much impossible to achieve if you're the CD of a tech company. But I thought that was really interesting that she said even acknowledging data that came off these devices made her symptoms subside by around 50%. So I thought for health management and illness management and things like that, I thought that was a really interesting insight from her about how she managed that. Some other things that came out of Rock Health, I thought this was pretty cool. This is an iPhone plugin with an app that allows you to do analysis based on vision and upload to a central repository just anything you can see. So I have a weird rash on my arm, and a doctor could use this in replacement of pretty expensive medical tech. And I thought, well, I wouldn't mind that to take little photos of each potential skin cancer I have as an Australian, or eye health, ear health. Showed a lot of pictures, so have a look at this. It's kind of cool what they're doing with, not that a $500 iPhone is a cheap medical device, but I like the idea it was extensible because it just used a magnifying glass into the camera, and the camera did some analysis and said, that's most likely a burst eardrum for when they were looking at ear. So semi-trained medical staff at least have used this technology to have a to bring benefit in kind of needy areas where they can maybe get a cell phone but don't have an ENT specialist or something. So I thought that might be interesting to use on yourself to diagnose, any kind of thing. Another project from Rock Health that they're backing, which I thought was pretty interesting, was has everyone seen this? It's like it's kind of hard to explain. It's really weird. It uses the camera to track how your head moves and your eyes, so it knows if you're pedaling or running, just based on really incremental face tracking. And you can pedal through these vistas. You can play games like run or pedal and drive a car. And I thought gamifying sports and fitness activity, whether it be on a treadmill or a stepper, it's just a kind of really interesting way to get people moving more, but also potentially analyze, rather than just reading what's on a treadmill and maybe you have a fitness watch or a Nike Plus. But I thought for people that weren't so involved in tracking their fitness activity via different devices, using the data that comes off the eye and face tracking to later feed back to them, how often they run and their exertion levels and stuff was a really nice side product of this. This is just meant to encourage you to go to the gym more and run more. But I thought it was kind of a nice little product that they were backing that had some data generative ramifications. This is really nice. This is kind of a hero story in the quantified self movement. A woman called Jane McGonigal is like a gaming scholar. She writes about video gaming and their applications for changing behavior. There's Google super better, but there's a really good NPR, like quite a long, hour-long radio story about this. It's a bit conceptual, but it's really cool in that the stat she showed about how it affects people's ability to get over really nasty traumatic accidents. So if you've been in a car accident and it's like broken your spine or your legs, depression's one of the main challenges to healing for anything, for any kind of disease that you're getting over, but specifically traumatic incidents. Depression's like the worst enemy you can have. And this is a way to kind of outsource the management of your depression via a video game. You really have to kind of watch the video, listen to the story. It's really hard to explain. But it was really interesting is you can track how you feel each day. Your family, friends, supporters, or strangers can log in and help you deal with these like essentially demons or bad guys that you have. One could be, scarring. Let's say you were horribly burnt on a part of your body. You can deal with scarring in a de-bodied kind of objectified way so it can be dealt with. And your fears around scarring can be beaten like beating a level in a video game. I thought it was really interesting. It's hard to explain, but definitely worth looking into because that idea of taking an issue, an illness or a trauma out of your body and putting it in a virtual space and tracking each day how you feel about that as you beat it in different games. A bit hard to explain, worth watching the video. I'm sure she explains it better than me. It's probably better to hear the people involved in the community talk about it as well. But yeah, kind of a cool, interesting little project. One of the other talks I went to was by a guy called Ed Hunsinger. He works for Splunk, which is a data and analytics technology platform used by finance and IT guys to detect issues in IT systems or finance systems where there are bagillions of data points. This is like actual big data where there's trillions of data points generated every day. You need special tools to analyze that. Splunk's one of those tools. It's actually free, so Google it and have a look. There's a web-based like software as a service version called Splunk Storm, which is what Ed was talking about. If you've got data, I'll show you next how to connect data that you probably already do have. You can put it into Splunk Storm. It's free for just regular people because businesses pay a decent amount of money to use it. He gave an example of a hack that he'd generated to basically teach himself how to use Raspberry Pi. So he lives in San Francisco, and they have these things called the Blue Angels, which are like planes that fly over and do like cool tricks for Fleet Week, which is a Navy thing in the US. He wanted to build a system that tracked how many flyovers there were. Could have written that down on a notepad, could have even had a little app that just tracks sound levels via his Mac, but he decided to build something that used the Raspberry Pi and a sound recorder, pretty much exactly like that one actually. And so he hooked that up with a mate, and every time these jets flew over with a flyby, the Raspberry Pi converted the wave file, the sound file from the recorder, just like that, and uploaded it to Splunk, and you could obviously see that these high sound points are the flyovers, and he hacked a report out of Splunk to tweet. Blue Angels, which is what they're called, just flew over me. So I thought it was an interesting way that you could use a third-party data collection device. I mean, this could have been an app that ran on his Mac just as easily, but it was cool that it was Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi thing generated these graphs, and so he then went on to say, well, what kind of data? You don't need to be hacking Raspberry Pi. Could you do? On his GitHub, like if anyone's pretty geeky and wants Python or PHP or other scripts to pull stuff into Splunk, he's got this. He's got Zio sleep data, geodata, Twitter, Fitbit into Splunk, GPX, which is like GPS data, inbox tracking that exports your Gmail inbox data out into Splunk so you can analyze it. Seeing as Splunk's free and all these tools are free, I thought it might be interesting for people that get a bit geeky with code to look at. This one was cool. Dump the iPhone, like, you know how iPhones track everywhere you go and used to send it back to Apple and now they do nothing with it? That's something that exports it to a CSV so you can put it into Google Maps and just see where you go. So cool little tech tools like that. No support in any of them for how to use them. You're going to need to speak to someone a bit geeky to set those up. Some other guys that were at South by and similar style of things from Europe at Resonate. It's something that I'd been interested in but have never really seen the outcome of is like biohacking, like hackerspaces and startup spaces like this, but based around biology. So I've been looking into growing of genetically sequenced bacteria and things for nefarious uses like selling toiletries and things like that. And these guys, GenSpace in Brooklyn, are doing this in a really cool way. It's essentially, called a community biolab. So if you have a cool idea that uses biology, so bacteria, genetic sequencing, and you need some equipment, generally you'd have to be at a university and hope that the dean or the professor of each school wanted you to work on a project that would get them published. For everyone that's not at a university or wants to do something that's not quite publishable, there are now these spaces popping up. So where we have hackerspaces in Singapore, where people work on code, and pretty soon, like starting in Brooklyn, there's one in Berlin, there will be spaces where you can work on life, like life forms that you're working on. Like my startup is this furry, sludgy thing that does something. I thought that was sounds gross now, but the way I look at it is 40 years ago, anyone playing with a computer used to look like that. They used to be dressed in a white coat, have grey frizzy hair, with a clipboard, looking like a total geek. Now we all carry multiple computers on our person, and it's no big deal. Computers used to belong in a lab. So what belongs in a lab now, like biological hazards, how quickly will that get out of the lab and into people's lounge rooms? I thought that was an interesting concept. Some of the stuff that they demoed was this creepy looking guy here is growing leather off pig cells. So he's growing like vegan leather. So using pig cells on a substrate of he's growing a leather jacket. This is a tiny leather jacket, and it looks like an embryo. It's so gross. A tiny leather jacket made out of pig leather that, as if it grew, and if he could grow it to human size and tan it, would be a pigskin leather jacket, but no pigs died. So he was talking about, victimless meat and things like that. So this is real gross now, but in the same way that computers were real techie and not really worth worrying about, I think this kind of space is quickly going to come in to everyone's kind of and the kind of QS element to this was he was saying you could be growing we already grow replacement organs and ears and things. Everyone's seen the ears on the rat, but growing your own serums. So right now traditionally they push serums through chemicals to make them human friendly. But you could be pushing it through a little mini you, a block of flesh, to work to kind of build antibodies for illness. So like you could outsource your immune system to a box in your lounge room that could basically deal and give you the ultimate flu shot. So not a flu shot that everyone's grandma gets, but one that your body came up with. And it goes through the illness and it does all of that. So for dealing with, other diseases, I thought it was kind of interesting around that. Super gross, I'm not saying it's not. It's terrifying, but, interesting. This is another little project that they had, which is kind of like made it a bit more palatable. You drew, this is our kind of company logo, you drew with different genetically engineered bacteria that glow different colors. So it's just a guy had spliced UV genes into bacteria, and he was not a biologist. It was something he was curious about. So it's getting to the point where you can be a hobbyist, like genetic manipulator, which, in the way that there are hobbyist software developers now, we'll have hobbyist lifeform developers, which is, kind of interesting. Totally creepy and probably really dangerous, but, the best things are. This is something at Resonate, but in the same field is a guy called James Auger, is the professor at the Royal College of Art. He deals in this called speculative design. It's designing real things that work, but that have artistic concepts behind them. He showed this project called carnivorous robots that use animals or meat to generate electricity to run themselves. So this, what could go wrong? Like, this is the beginning of the end, right? This is a fly, fly paper. Like flies stick on a bit of paper and they die there, right? This machine is a revolving wheel of fly paper that catches flies, scrapes them off into, it's called a microbial fuel cell. It uses chemicals to break down carbon in animals and produces electricity off that. So this machine eats flies and generates electricity. This is a fly zapper that feeds, it's not enough to generate the zapper, but it zaps bugs. They fall into the microbial fuel cell. Their refuse falls into this tube. The tube feeds another machine. So it's like a digestive system spread out over a room made with bugs. So I thought, I don't know, there's not a QS element to that, but there's this awesome element to that. Like, these are machines that eat meat. Like, you saw it here first. This is the beginning of robots eating us for fuel. At South by, but also at Resonate, so there's some crossover, which is what I was talking about, is this idea of generative art and computer art building fabric. So where Quantified Self is about tracking data to manage, be mindful, and potentially change behavior, whether that be through fitness, food consumption, smoking, other things. I thought, what if the data that you collect passively or actively could impact the clothes you wear? So it's not just wearables as in wearable devices, it's wearables around fabric being a wearable, your clothes being part of a technology that don't just gather data around you, because that exists, like sensors within clothes is everywhere now. But what if they reacted to you? So this is a project that you can quickly design a dress, and it builds it in these triangular patterns. It gets laser cut and robotically sewn out of stuff. The kind of logical extension is, this is a project from someone in Germany. This garment, based on your mood, which can be detected via a device or manual input, contracts or expands to kind of puff up your jacket or to kind of make you more insular. So I like this idea that's kind of coming out, is like garments we wear can respond to our body, not just like a hypercolor t-shirt, but more into kind of indicating through color and shape and form a response to the data that we put into them. So there's heaps of cool stuff coming out in wearables, or what they're calling them when they're literally clothes is washables. So that's the term I learned. Another thing at Resonate, a cool guy called Carl McDonald. Definitely look up his stuff. Is funny and technologically brilliant and really interesting. This is something that I thought might be interesting. It's a mashup between technology that existed called Smiley, which is a little app you install on your PC or Mac. And every time you smile, it writes a smiley, literally in like a text field. So let's say you're writing an email to a mate. It uses your webcam that's always on, and you smile, it puts a smiley in whether you wanted to or not. So it's kind of this tracking device that it's open source. You can download it now, you can hack it, you can adapt it. So Carl, who invented the smiley thing, adapted this to run in a web browser or based on a web browser. So whatever on the web that you smiled at, it took a screenshot and uploaded it. And so there's a community now called Happy Place, which is a screenshot that looks like this. So a kitten in a helicopter video made someone smile. So it takes a photo of their face and a screenshot of the video and uploads it. And I thought the implications for this is, wouldn't it be nice to just track, have running on your computer at work, your smile to frown ratio? And he's done some really cool stuff. Carl McDonald, definitely Google the stuff he's done around analyzing your face when you use a computer, like whether you smile, but mostly you're just in this kind of catatonic, and he was just taking photos. So check out his videos, because I thought it's just a nice data point to have, is how often do I smile during the day, and can I increase that? Can I do more work, just even in my day-to-day job that makes me smile? So I thought, nice little tool that's freely available to measure that. He's done some other stuff around measuring using a Kinect. People describing sound and making artwork out of that. So when you describe sound, use your hands a lot, gesture. He's freeze framing that gestural motion using Microsoft Kinect and building 3D sculptures out of it. You can kind of see someone's hand moving through time here. And I don't know exactly what the implication of that is. I thought it was just interesting. So this idea of turning motion over time, or motion, into a solid object, I thought might be kind of if anyone's interested in looking at their motion through space over time, mapping that out in kind of a sculpture that they can give their mum or something. I don't know. So that's about it. These are two things that are really hard to figure out if you don't go to these places, is there's audio of lots of key talks on SoundCloud. So download them, listen to them. That's, I didn't know about it, and they only told us this year, and I've been going to South by for 3 years. Lots of audio, so if you're interested in any of this stuff, jump on the SoundCloud and try and grab the audio. Also, hidden deep within the Resonate site are last year's videos of every panel. So if you're kind of interested in data, art, technology, and kind of the cutting edge of that stuff, this year they were videoing everything. Last year it took them 9 months to get the videos up. So look at 2012 and in another 6 to 9 months, have a look at that. But some really cool stuff by guys like Nicholas Feltron, who does his annual report for himself, and lots of kind of data geeky guys in the videos from last year to check out. Cool, thank you.